Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us today. Of course, today is a very special lecture, one that is given by a resident. Mr. Burney purchased on board the World in May, has sailed with us several times, and 2 weeks ago came on board. And when he first approached me about this lecture, he said, I have a story that I'd like to share with everyone. It may be difficult for some people to hear, and the subject matter is quite hard, but it's a story nonetheless. And he said, is there an opportunity that I could have to tell this story? And we looked at all the possible dates, and today seemed like the best time to get everybody together to hear about Mr. Burney's experiences. This lecture, of course, will be available again on our Pronto system and through other avenues. So with that, I'll let Mr. Burney do all the talking himself. So please welcome Mr. Leonard Burney.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Is the mic working? Can you hear at the back? Okay. Well, as you know, this is a lecture about the liberation of Belsen concentration camp, which took place in April 1945. That's 63 years ago, and I imagine it's before many people in this audience were born. However, the name of Belsen, I think, has entered the English language as in connection with the horrors of the Nazi regime and what it can do and what it did do. So I expect most people have heard the name anyway. Okay, I'll start with a few words about the Nazi system of concentration camps. Actually, the word is not really very accurate. They were prison camps. They were not concentration camps. They were prison camps, and that's what they should have been called. Anyhow, when the Nazi Party came to power, they very soon started. They were democratically elected, as it happens. But the first job was to get rid of all the democracy and get down to a real solid dictatorship. And the part of the policy was to remove from German society all the elements which the National Socialist Party, the Nazi Party, regarded as undesirable and should be cleansed, ethnic cleansing, if you like. And those people that they wanted to remove, and did remove, consisted primarily of the Jewish population of Germany, all communists, anybody who resisted the National Socialism, anti-Nazi people, or who spoke out against it in any kind of a way, all gypsies, all homosexuals, and all mentally retarded people. Their idea was to sort of get rid of all these and get down to what they called a pure Aryan race. And quite soon after the regime started, they started to, of course, the prison system that Germany wasn't anywhere near big enough to handle things like that, so they started constructing concentration camps, prison camps, all around Germany, mostly in remote areas. They were, by the end of the war, there were hundreds of them. Now, Bergen-Belsen, to give it its proper name, was one such a camp, and that was situated near Hanover, which is more or less sort of central west of Germany. And it was constructed originally in the early 40s to house, I suppose, about 10,000 prisoners. There was, as was always done, there was a sort of guards area, which the guards who were SS lived and worked from, and then there was the prison camp itself. In the case of Belsen, there was off the road, there was the area with the guards, of course, the SS quarters, and then a long road, about probably a kilometre long, with dozens of long wooden huts, both sides of the road. And in those huts, I presume that the intention was something like 200 prisoners to a hut. And they were in different sort of compounds with wire mesh and barbed wire in between, according to the different kinds of prisoners that were there. In 1944, which is the year before the end of the war and the liberation, most of the inmates of that prison, and they were about 10,000, it wasn't crowded at that time, were women and children as well as men, mostly from Western Europe. People have been rounded up from France, Holland, Belgium. There were some people from Hungary and different parts, and they were there in prison. One interesting aspect of it is that I think it was Himmler who devised an idea of what they called exchange. And of course, when the war broke out in Britain and then later in America, one of the first things that was done was to round up all the German citizens, and they were imprisoned in Britain and Germany and America and Canada, and they were held as enemy aliens, enemy citizens. And there was an idea set up by Himmler, I believe, to exchange some Jewish people from Western Europe to exchange, like one for the Germans held captive by the Allies. And several hundred men, women and children were rounded up, mostly from Holland and Belgium, and one part of the camp was what they called the exchange prisoner camp. And these people were allowed to have their own clothes and reasonably looked after, with the idea of exchanging for German civilians via, I think it was going to be Switzerland or Sweden or somewhere like that. Actually, the scheme never worked. I believe there was a few exchange, but when we got there were the hundreds of these people who had been kept there as exchange prisoners. And that was one use of the camp. Of the other camps, prison camps in Germany and around, they were many set up in Poland, in Ukraine, and Russia and Eastern Germany, and most of these were in fact slave labor camps. People were arrested, but instead of being just annihilated, the thing was we might as well get some work out of them before we do that. And a lot of these thousands and thousands of people were arrested to do work in factories and agriculture as slave laborers. That actually did not apply to Belsen camp as it happened. The gas chambers and that you heard about, of course, were started in 1944, I think it was, and it was in